the one that the main character eventually selects as like waste runoff from some city, which he mixes with water. And I was like, is he actually drinking? That's what he's drinking? Or is that like the name of a beverage?
Of the cocktail, yeah.
Right. Hello and welcome to the Skiffy Fanny Shows at the Movies.
A very tasty world.
I legitimately hate that line, Daniel.
I think it's from the novel. It's from the novel even, too.
Yes. I haven't read the novel, but I'm sure Paul in chat has read the novel, so we'll see. Well, anyway, I'm Sean.
I'm Daniel.
And tonight we are talking about the 1973 British black comedy apocalyptic science fiction film, The Final Program, written and directed by Robert Fuest, based on the 1968 first Jerry Cornelius novel by Michael Moorcock. It stars John Finch, Jenny Runeker, Hugh Griffith, Patrick McGee, Sterling Hayden, Ronald Lacey, Harry Andrews, Derek O'Connor, and Sarah Douglas.
Sean and I watched the recent, beautiful 2-disc limited edition release of The Final Program, with over 6 hours of special features, including the first ever participation of Michael Moorcock, all from Severin Films. So thank you very much, Severin, for sending us a copy of this, along with when they sent us The Ghost, which we covered like a month or so ago. So there, yes, you can see the glory.
Yeah, so for the folks watching physically, I have shared the actual slipcase that Severin's releasing it in. But if you're not watching visually, I recommend looking up the new cover design that's going with the film. It is a very, I don't know who did it, but it is kind of psychedelic-y weird, and I like it. I recommend looking it up. It's very fun, and we should mention...
It's fitting for it.
Yes, very much so. I do think we have to emphasize those extra features. There are a lot of extra features, which I don't think Daniel and I both listened or watched all of them, but we did watch many of them, and they're very interesting. And I will say, even though we're not going to get into the details, but you mentioned that Michael Moorcock participated, and he was in an interview with this, and that interview is very, very, very interesting. And I recommend, if you get this, watch that interview. It's very cool.
That's, as sort of an aside, that's what I'd like about these releases a lot, like that you'll never get from just watching a movie, streaming it, or even finding other, like the newer DVDs or Blu-rays that get released. Extra features have become something that have sort of disappeared. Whereas these more boutique releases, they really put they're more expensive, but at the same time, they're putting in a lot more effort in those bonus features that usually are of a lot of academic interest. So if you're a nerd about movies, or you have academic interest, which a lot of listeners of this have, I think it's a real strong selling point for them. Even when the movie might not be the greatest, because the features make it like really fascinating to just see what goes into making these things, even if they're not wholly successful like this one wasn't.
You know, you make a great point that I hadn't really thought about this, but because of the way the streaming atmosphere works, we don't tend to get a lot of behind the scenes material. And if we do, it's like short little YouTube things, or if we're lucky, it's some sort of like secondary program that follows the recent episode where they bring people on an interview. So like The Walking Dead had Talking Dead, which was their post program. And I think Stranger Things had something like that, but most shows aren't going to get that, or most films aren't going to get that. And I think there's something kind of lost in that I think is relevant to what we do, Daniel, which is that sometimes we watch films that have a history of being considered bad movies. And in some cases, there's a lot of information we can sort of pull that kind of gives us a sense of how did this happen, right? Like Zardoz would be like an infamous example that at some point we will watch again for Torture Cinema Redux. But that has a lot of background behind it about why that film is notoriously so bad. And I think it makes that film more interesting when you understand like all of the drug use and the choices that people made, even if they didn't work. And if you don't have that, though, like you can't really fully understand why a film ended up the way it is.
Right.
Because you don't have any kind of sense of like what was the intention behind it, or what were they going for, or were there budgetary constraints, or did things go wrong because someone was meddling? Like the Isle of Dr. Moreau would be a famous example, which has now documentaries and books about its infamous horribleness. So I think one of the things I would have to say I agree strongly with is that boutique presses have done a really good job of trying to fill in some of the gaps that especially older, lesser known or cult films sometimes don't have, which is, behind the scenes footage, interviews, the commentaries, and so on and so forth.
They're showing the bits of quality that they have, even if they're imperfect.
Also, restoration work, we have to say. We are going to talk about the film itself, but I think it has to be said that the film quality of this is in 4K and on regular Blu-ray. Daniel and I only watched the Blu-ray because we don't have 4K TVs. I have no idea how much better the 4K looks, but the Blu-ray is, for a film from 1973, that's 50 plus years ago, is crisp as shit. It is so beautiful, and there's very little in this film. There's a couple of shots where it's just clear they didn't have a shot that could clean up any better than it was. But most of this film is the only reason you can tell it's an older film is the way people are dressed in the cars they're driving, right? Otherwise, it looks beautiful. You could see pores on people's faces. It's impressive work.
Yeah, totally.
So Daniel, what is this film about?
All right, so strap in, mesdames and messieurs. So it's going to be a wild ride. All right, so Earth has reached the end of an age, the end of times, or at least a time. Much of society we know is now destroyed, in ruins, and really the only remnants that remain seem to be pieces of government and the wealthy still trying to maintain a dying grip to the old ways in sort of a nostalgic way that's not sustainable. Amid this is the protagonist of the film, Jerry Cornelius, who we'll talk a lot more about, played by John Finch. He's sort of this weird playboy physicist hybrid that also gives vibes of Austin Powers / James Bond because of the time period, even though he is not technically a secret agent. So Jerry Cornelius is attending the funeral of his Nobel Prize winning father, who has been working in Lapland on a design for a perfect self-replicating human being called The Final Program. Attending the funeral is Dr. Smiles, Graham Crowden, who wants a microfilm that the elder Dr. Cornelius has made that contains all the research data. Dr. Smiles and Jerry are joined by the mysterious and formidable Miss Brunner, played by Jenny Runacre, and a group of other scientists, and together they all go to England to retrieve the microfilm, which is hidden away in the highly secured Cornelius family home. And there in that family home lives Jerry's sister, Catherine, played by Sarah Douglas, where she lives, and kind of captive of their paranoid, drug-addicted brother, Frank, played by Derek O'Connor. So before actually going to this highly secured house, Jerry consults with Major Wrongway Lindbergh, played by Sterling Hayden, who is a U.S. military officer who in this sort of apocalyptic world has become stranded in England. He supplies them with a jet, and Jerry also goes to visit an old friend called Shades, Ronald Lacey, who hooks them up with some napalm. And together, the group then launches an assault on the Cornelius home compound. The house is protected by a sound system that induces pseudo-epilepsy. It has lots of other traps, including poison gas and a lethal chessboard. Kind of wondering if that's where J.K. Rowling got her idea for the chessboard in Harry Potter.
Don't give her credit. Don't give her credit for nothing.
Okay, she just stole it. Jerry finds and confronts his brother Frank there in the house. A fight ensues between the two. In the confusion, Catherine is accidentally killed by Jerry. So Jerry accidentally kills his sister, whom we'll talk about it. It's implied he has an incestuous relationship with her. Jerry is wounded.
Yeah.
Frank falls into the hands of Miss Brunner. Miss Brunner forces Frank to open the vaults where the microfilm is stored, but Frank basically outsmarts her with the clever way the vaults function, and he escapes with the microfilm. So Miss Brunner takes Jerry back to her home or apartment to recuperate. When he wakes up from the damage that Frank caused, she introduces him to her new lover, Jenny, Sandy Radcliffe, and they plot to basically find Frank in the microfilm. Before going to bed, though, that night, Jerry observes Miss Brunner begin having sex with Jenny, but then at some point, Miss Brunner absorbs Jenny into herself. Jenny is no more. Frank, meanwhile, set up a meeting to sell the microfilm to one of the scientists, Dr. Baxter, played by Patrick McGee. Jerry and Miss Brunner track them down, and Miss Brunner basically attacks and absorbs Dr. Baxter. Another fight ensues between Frank and Jerry. Frank is killed. Miss Brunner and Jerry then return to Lapland by hot air balloon with the recovered microfilm, where scientists await there in Lapland to initiate the final program. That process of the final program involves the combination of Miss Brunner with another person to form sort of like the perfect hermaphroditic being. Brunner ends up choosing Jerry over the scientist's intended subject. There's some fighting between Jerry and that intended subject named Dimitri. But ultimately, Jerry and Miss Brunner enter the machinery, I guess, the apparatus of the final program. They're bathed in the solar radiation. They blur into each other, basically become one. And the energy that is created from this ends up melting basically all the equipment and kills, or at least very nearly kills, all the scientists. From this destruction, a single being emerges from the chamber. It has Jerry's voice, but a hunched pre-hominid, so pre-human, modern human hominid appearance. Think like the beginning of 2001. That creature leaves Brunner's hidden base and observes in a last shot looking at the camera that it is a very tasty world. The end. Crazy, and only what like the early 1970s could do, or 60s, really, when you consider when Moorcock wrote this.
I will say this about it, that everything about this is exactly what you expect a 1970s, like, weirdly almost psychedelic sci-fi movie would be like. And that is in all of the good and all of the bad ways you can imagine. It reminds me
very British as well.
And very British. Yeah, I would say this is like Omega Man and this, I feel like, have a very similar feeling to them, with the exception that obviously Omega Man is, by comparison, far less British in tone, given the core actor. But they have that same, like, 1970s sci-fi movie logic where things seem to happen and they're supposed to have, like, far more profound revelation attached to them, but then you think about it for 2 seconds and you're like, you were drunk when you did this. Like, Wait, you had to be. Yeah. The thing that really stands out to me, and I have to talk about it because I think we're going to talk about more interesting things later.
Well, before you get to that, just one quick comment. Sorry. I wanted to just say, you mentioned like the Omega Man. I almost see this as, because before you said black comedy, ? It's not really comedic per se, but I would agree that it somewhat is like taking, because it's satirical in a lot of regards. I would say it meshes Dr. Strangelove, which was the mid-60s, with a later 70s movie that Jenny Runacre was also in called Jubilee, which is like a post-apocalyptic time-traveling British film. Both of those movies are in the Criterion Collection. I recommend seeing them. I'm guessing people have heard of Dr. Strangelove. But Jubilee is another really weird, bonkers British sci-fi movie with Jenny Runacre. But those two, and it's very punk, those two things are kind of meshed together here in this with a psychedelic twist.
Yeah.
So that's really kind of like the vibes I got from it. But in any case, back to you, Sean, what you were going to say.
Yeah, I think we're going to circle back to the psychedelic-y stuff and the black satirical nature of this. I want to circle back. So I think when we're done with the thing I say, you start that conversation, because I don't want to talk too much. So I just want to talk about the very end of this. So There is one moment of what I consider to be legitimate comedy towards the end, which is the moment when he fights Dimitri and is nearly killed by Dimitri. And when she finally comes in and shoots Dimitri, he turns around and says, like, you took your fucking time. And the way he delivers the line, I thought that was really funny. Yeah. Right?
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
But there isn't a lot of that in the film. But the thing that really I found very much a letdown in the film was the final reveal of the Messiah creature thing. Because if you look at the original poster for this film, which originally was placed in like the underground and then was taken down because people found it offensive, because it shows basically a half man, half woman silhouette. And that's the implication at the end, is that this creation will be hermaphroditic. It will be self-replicating. It will be able to produce among itself, right? And so it will have all of those features. But the reveal that we get is it's basically just Cornelius as a Neanderthal ape man.
Like a regression kind of thing.
It feels like a regression. And I don't know if that's the point they were making, is like the solution to the end of the world is man must return to his most primitive self, which is okay, but that's not where you were leading us. You were leading us to, like, we were going to get something far more alien and hermaphroditic and, you know, non-gender conforming creature, entity. And even when the reveal is given to us, right, we get this, I think the only time in the film you get a first-person view, which is, you know, as we're looking through this creature's eyes before the reveal, you know, there's this very strong language of, like, the Messiah and so on. And apparently, like, in the original book, like, when people
the eternal champion.
Right, the eternal champion. Like, they like, look upon this creation and they, like, are in awe of it and, like, bow before it because it is, like, so supreme. But then the reveal is the opposite. And I couldn't tell if that was the comedy. Like, is that supposed to be funny? Or is there another point being made? I just couldn't quite make heads or tails of it. And then he says that it's a tasty world. And I'm like, okay, but I don't understand. What does this line mean? I don't. It's just like I feel like he's about to start a sitcom, right? And that's like his line.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like an ironic take on what he ends up looking like, or that they make him being I'll get to the last line in a second, but what you're saying of what they put on screen compared to what they were kind of selling leading up, I think mostly that goes hand in hand with a lot of the limitations that in the special features they point out from the production point of view got shortchanged in terms of money giving out and studio influences.
And the director.
And the director influence. The director had certain things that also coincide with the elements that make Michael Moorcock not like this movie, is that it doesn't go full enough into the gender nonconformity, the gender bending, and that hermaphroditic idea. And Cornelius himself is much more of a gender bending character. The director doesn't include that. And even the director puts in some lines, like in that scene where Miss Brunner is with her lover, Jenny. I forget what the exact line is, but Cornelius basically
when you're ready
says
for
something.
The real thing.
Yeah, the real thing, like, because a woman can't possibly give to you what a man would give. Like, Moorcock was pissed off about that, rightly so, because I think it's completely antithetical to what this movie is trying to say and what Moorcock was trying to say. And so I think that comes both from the director, it comes from the production aspects, it comes from, at the time, people were still very fearful in Britain, even today, right? We just mentioned, what's her name, right? There's this backlash of people against that concept and that idea, that they weren't wanting to push the envelope as much as they should have in producing this. And I think the reveal of the creature at the end was their half-baked poor choice at doing something else. For the line, it's a very tasty world. I find it interesting just because it is so ambiguous in, like, how do you interpret it? What does it mean? is this creature really going to be the savior? Is it going to consume the world? And so a lot of this is steeped in Eastern, particularly Indian mythology and concepts like the Kali Yuga and the changing of ages, that to give birth and, to a new age, you have to destroy and consume the previous, right? So there's this, it goes hand in hand in the circle of consumption and creation, which you see in the Miss Brunner character as well, consuming, absorbing people to create something new. And so that it's a tasty world is like, this is the new age. He's the new thing. He's going to go out and consume now and create something new. That's kind of how I take it, at least, but it's definitely very weird and ambiguous.
I guess if you want to read it as, an aspect of Brunner being present here because she figuratively consumes people, but she absorbs them into her body. I have no idea how that works, but I don't need to know. I just like the idea that she's just swallowing people into her. I guess maybe that does raise a question that, is this the Messiah, as everyone keeps suggesting that it will be? Or did they create something that is just going to go and consume the world, right, or whatever's left of it? And if that's the case, the ending is
the end.
Really rather like the final program is, in fact, quite literally the end of the world. And they've created the final creature that does the rest of humanity in. Of course, they don't do anything with that. We were just like making speculation at this point, but that's an interesting idea. I kind of would like them to do that.
And that, human meddling with things kind of does this as well.
And that's all throughout the film, the amount of meddling.
And you have the sort of excess of society that's happening. Like in that scene where Cornelius goes to see Shades to get the napalm. It's in this like wild, bright, it's like the brightest 60s colors, like very reminiscent of like a playground that Austin Powers would be found in, with people playing video games, or not video games, like pinball machines and games all around, lots of bright lights and noises. But then right outside in other areas, like it's desolation. It's this post-apocalyptic wasteland.
Yeah.
So you sort of have like these excesses of society that everybody is still doing, and there's a deterioration of the soul that's happening everywhere.
Do you know who Shades is played by?
I know the name of the actor. I don't know the significance of that.
So just like 8 years later, this same actor, Ronald Lacey, is going to play one of the most famous characters in science fiction, which would be Sturmbannführer Arnold Ernst Todt from Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Looks nothing like him, but
Right, because he's got like this like very fake red hair almost, and he's equally as eccentric, but in a different way. He's not German eccentric now. He's more like pinball machine obsessed eccentric, which he gets some very interesting lines to chew on, which I found he was such a fun character. I kind of wish there was more of him, to be honest. I wanted more scenery with him, more of him like rambling philosophical notions. And
well, I think there was supposed to be more of all of that, and that whole scenery, the whole set pieces and such, they ran out of money, is my understanding from.
Yeah, that this is a low budget film. It's like less than $1 million, I think they spent on it, which, it's not a lot of money even today. That's nothing. So, but I think the most interesting part is part of what you're saying already, which is the like very interesting contrasting set choices that they get. Like their opening sequence it's supposed to be in Lapland. I don't know if it's actually shot there, but it's like this desolate, like almost looks like volcanic runoff landscape. And there are like people in cloaks walking and dragging sticks because they're going to start a pyre to burn Cornelius's father's body. And you get scenes like that, and then you get ruins, but then you get these like very opulent, obscenely flamboyant sequences like the one you're kind of talking about, which has got like white mud wrestling and like trapeze acts. And there's a point when a bartender comes up and offers different beverages, and the one that the main character eventually selects is like waste runoff from some city, which he mixes with water. And I was like, is he actually drinking? That's what he's drinking? Or is that like the name of a beverage?
Of the cocktail, yeah.
Right. And like the kinds of choices, like even they might even consume these like super wealthy people, like literally consuming the essence of the things that their wealth has destroyed. There's elements of that. And there's so many wonderful sequences of just really interesting set choice. Like even the lemon orchard that they spend a few moments in, right? It's the kind of thing that like you just would not expect. You definitely don't expect in England. So I have no idea where this is supposed to be. But it's the kind of thing that if it were in England, like only a rich person is going to have a lemon orchard, right? Because the amount of effort that's going to take to keep those alive through a winter is obscene. But they're in this lemon orchard and they're just hanging out there. There's a lot of interesting set choices, I guess is what I'm saying. And some of it's psychedelic and some of it is very naturalistic and some of it's ruins. And there's a lovely contrast then back and forth between a lot of these things, which I just found very, very interesting and probably the best part of the film.
I wish they could have done, like you said, more in a lot of those.
I agree. Yeah.
So you had wanted me to go back to something. What was it?
Well, we're kind of already there, but because we're kind of talking about, I guess, tangentially the psychedelic aspects of this.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And then I suppose we've kind of talked about the comedy, but if you had more to say on this film's comedic approach.
Yeah, that does remind me of one of the things that I just thought while you were talking and then forgot about. The opulence you had mentioned made me think of Sterling Hayden in this, because you have this general and he has like this big gold chain, if I remember correctly.
It's like an ankh.
Right? Like, yeah, and he has the ankh symbol, right? And so it goes very much with sort of like the time period of the sort of like hippie kind of thing and everything about him.
It's the Castro beard. Did you not notice?
And it's the Castro beard,
Castro
yes.
beard.
Yeah. But that whole scene, I would say, was another moment that I thought was hilarious, that had comedy to it. And because of his name, Wrong Way, and I think he even says, it's been a while since I've watched this now, but I think like he went the wrong way and ended up in England. He was supposed to go somewhere else and ended up there, and now he's trapped there because the world has collapsed. The other aspect of this that makes it funny is just apparently Sterling Hayden was completely sauced while making this in the special features. I don't remember if it was Jenny Runacre's interview or one of the producers.
The producer does mention this.
Yeah, how drunk Sterling Hayden was and how you could notice because every line that you would give him, he'd repeat the line back to the actor and then use that to continue talking about it. Repeat the previous line, and then they showed clips from it. It's like, oh yeah, but it gave it that nature to it, and the fact he kept repeating the line before continuing on made it a sort of comedic and funny, because everything about that scene was kind of a little off and absurd. Yeah, and that was the moment that, I mean, he's also in Dr. Strangelove, so that really was the scene where I was like, this is like satire of military, of American military personnel here. And that was very reminiscent of Dr. Strangelove.
He is probably the character that feels the most like we're poking at something and we're making fun of that thing. He feels very satirical in his presentation, right? We made the joke about the Castro beard, but like this is 1973, right? So to have an American military member who looks effectively like Fidel Castro, right? Not, barely a decade later from the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? There's an element of like a real, like, you're almost like the film is almost suggesting that like the American military is almost of the same ilk, right? That same kind of brutalistic, opportunistic, which of course it is, but maybe people didn't fully know that in 1973 yet. I found that very fun, and I don't know that I would say it's like laugh out loud funny in that scene per se for me, but it is of a comedic style that isn't the kind of haha funny. It is more like if you really are paying attention to the details, like you're getting a different kind of humor. And I don't know what you call that, but definitely agree. I agree. Like
it's a subtle British humor. Yeah.
Maybe it is a subtle British humor. Maybe.
At least I don't know about that specific example, but I think this movie as a whole has that. It's rarely, if ever, a laugh out loud kind of humor. The line you
No,
mentioned, and there's a line, I don't know where it occurs in the movie, but I came across it as I was trying to find the exact line for It's a Tasty World. Now I hate long goodbyes, so piss off.
it's in the orchard.
As I read that, I was like, oh yeah, that was a funny moment. So there are lines like that that are kind of like you'll chuckle at, but by and large, I would say when comedy is there, it's that subtle comedy under the surface of a satirical aspect, whether it's satiricizing politics or military in this case, or satiricizing class differences and sort of like the consumerism and obsession with objects and obsession with owning things, like with the pinball and the obsession with extravagance. That I would say is more the root of comedy here.
Yeah, I would agree there that that this is. I think to make this laugh out loud funny would require a change to the lines that are read, because we would need more of that British humor of like, I don't know what it's escaping my name, but like when you're making you're making like pun humor, but even more sophisticated, to where like you really have to pay attention to the exact language that's being used because there's a joke there.
Mm-hmm.
The moments when this film, I think, goes for an actual comedic line, they're not really clever lines. They're more kind of obvious. I would say, like, the example I gave is "You Took Your Fucking Time" would be one, but there's a scene earlier where they're talking about Duel, the little machine that is going to create the new hermaphroditic Messiah caveman. And at one point, Cornelius basically says, like, and it'll do your laundry too, or something to that effect.
Yes.
Right? Which is like, it's not a very clever line, but that is a pretty humorous line. And I kind of wish the character had, he a little bit more of that, like the quips, like the little,
right, the bite. Yeah.
the little bite in his lines. And I think it's just not quite there. When I was watching the Moorcock interview for this, he strongly kind of gives a sense of who this character is sort of meant to be. And it made me think, not because he says this, but it made me feel like the way Cornelius is meant to be portrayed is sort of almost like a satire of a James Bond type figure. I feel like the thing we're missing from that is like a very sardonic wit that is just super self-aware. That I kind of feel is what was needed here, and maybe that is in Moorcock's script, which he did write, and then the director apparently just threw it out, which I don't know, maybe it's in there, but I would have liked to see that, but that is not here.
Yeah, he's almost a little too pompous in this, I would say.
Yeah, a little bit.
Because he's full of himself, but not self-aware necessarily enough. The other sort of scenes in the movie that recalled to me the psychedelic comedy type mixture would be that entire assault on the house and all the weird shit that starts happening, in that it happens to the scientist because, like, Jerry is the one who knows this house and knows about like traps and how to get through things. And so he tells him to just wait in a room, but then, or actually it might've been waiting in an elevator to begin with. And then he goes off, but then the scientist, like gas starts coming out, and like one step by another, the scientists keep doing really stupid things, getting further and further, like putting themselves at risk until Jerry kind of comes to like rescue them. And a lot of those traps have psychedelic type, like the lights have that nature to them. And there's some of that comedic aspect to that whole sequence, I would say.
Oh yeah. It also paints a very, very clear picture of who Frank is by comparison to Cornelia Jerry. Because, Frank, when we do get to meet Frank, right, he's clearly like sociopathic and like kind of Joker-like in his quality. But just seeing them like navigate this house where they're like, how do you operate this chessboard? It must be a door. They're like, you idiot, it must be in check. And then the guy gets stabbed in the chest
Yes.
by like a bolt or whatever. It's this very twisted, sadistic house that Frank is in charge of. And like the thing that really got me was the like caretaker is living in this house. This is his daily existence. It's like navigating all these traps, and this poor man
Frank kills him.
and then Frank kills him. When you think about, like, it's not that it's funny in the moment of the film, but as you think through the logic of what's happening, you're like, okay, but this is so insane, right? What are they paying this man, right? I hope he had like a massive amount of money that he could give over to a family member.
Well, when you first meet him, he's almost like you see like an Alfred in him, right? Because he seems to be this butler type he's supplying Jerry with like the boat, I think it is.
Yeah.
At the beginning, he shows up in, and he seems to have that role there for the family, and for Jerry in particular is almost like the Bruce Wayne here. And then you get to the house and he's laying in the hallway like shot and dying. You're like, oh, okay.
You can't imagine living there. It's a horrible house. At first, when Jerry tells you, I'm going to burn the house down, which is at the very beginning of the film, right?
Yes, yeah.
The thing you think at that moment is like, wow, Jerry like really hated his dad, or
yeah,
right? Because like, why would you burn the whole house? Like, sell it or something, right? But it's like a very absurd kind of thing to do. But then you see the house and you're like, oh no, I get it.
Oh yeah,
you absolutely. You can't sell this to anybody. You don't know where all the booby traps are. Like, can you imagine doing a showing in this house and like, a nice couple? Oh, if I put this in check, like it's a hazard.
Yeah, here's the bed where I slept with my sister and then accidentally shot her.
Nope, he's accused and implied, but not explicit.
Oh well, yes. In the books, right.
You can definitely
that whole
feel it.
Character, the interactions and the character of Catherine are another area where this book seems to really shortchange it, or this movie seems to shortchange it of what the books have, because in the series, my understanding is it's a recurring motif. Catherine and Jerry, they like die and they come back again and such, and are resurrected and have this sort of like Isis Osiris incestuous aspect to their relationship that goes back to, mythology through the ages. So it's weird, but it makes a mythological sense, I guess, if you have this as the eternal champion kind of character that Moorcock is going for. But my point to saying all that is that you don't get that here in this movie. It's implied. You don't really get to feel who Catherine is, what her relationship with Jerry is in any regard. So it sort of minimizes her to unfortunate levels in the movie. That, again, might have been, or probably a combination of the script and just the money they ended up having to film. But
yeah, I mean, this is something they certainly could have filmed more of, but they just didn't. And I think I don't know. I don't know how I would feel about the film, like, really playing out an incestuous relationship between them.
Yeah.
Because that's uncomfortable and odd. But, at the same time, maybe more hints would be nice, because at least then we'd kind of understand, like, there is more to his desire to save her from Frank, who's, like, drugging her and all of these things. There's more to that desire than just it's his sister. And his brother's insane, so he doesn't want his brother to have control. But it's weird, like, the two brothers are, like, fighting over control of the sister here. And if the incestuous relationship is implied, then this becomes very mythological in a very different way, for sure. But they don't go that route. And thankfully, the only romantic scene we get between the absorbing lady, whose name has escaped me now,
Miss Brunner.
Miss Brunner, thank you. Miss Brunner and Jerry is like at the very, very end, right as they're merging.
Yeah,
they're like rolling around naked, but it feels like a wrestling match. It doesn't feel sexy. Like,
no,
yeah. Did you get that feeling? Like they're almost like wrestling for control.
Yes, and it feels like a physical merging, right? Of both paradoxically both giving into it and fighting it, resisting it in some way.
Hmm.
So I get that reference. But it does, even though they're naked, it definitely doesn't come across as a sexual type thing. You get it, the sexual type aspect, the only part of the movie that gives that vibe, I would say, would be Miss Brunner with Jenny when they, which you don't really see either. It's just them like going on the couch and then Jenny
Right.
gets absorbed, right?
They shoot it rather cleverly, where it's so strongly implied you get exactly what's happening, but it's not shown in a way that would make it even more explicit, which I find, for the era, I suppose they could have really gone for titillation here, no pun intended, but they chose for the more subtle variation of it, which I kind of like more because I'm frankly, I don't know that I need any more titillation after watching Game of Thrones and the sheer volume of breasts that are just thrust in your face in that. Not enough butt from guys to counterbalance that.
To counter it, or wang doodles.
There are a handful. You do get to see a few, which, like, I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm hit or miss on, like, full-on naked body. I don't know. Maybe I'm just old.
Yeah. Well, the nudity in this, there's Jenny, and there's Jenny Runacre. And I absolutely adore Jenny Runacre as an actress. And pretty much everything I've seen her in, Jubilee, this, and I saw Agfa on their Patreon had put up a video of, was it a drag Miss World? It was some British thing that was very, very gay. And she was a part of that, that was put on an annual sort of like festival. I forget what organization it was. And there were lots of like naked people in that, including Jenny Redacre. So she was like really big at the time in sort of the performance art, transgressive art, and the burgeoning sort of like gender fluidity, homosexuality kind of wave there in Britain and the world. And everything that she's in, I've seen her naked, but it's very rarely like a real sexual thing. And it's always done in that way that's not exploitative at all, and really shows how to do that well, I would say.
I think even here, I don't know, you could see that this could be the kind of like psychedelic 70s sci-fi film that just really indulges itself in those kinds of things. And here I don't feel like it does. And to be very clear, it absolutely could just have done that. We have even watched films for At the Movies that, some German films where there's just like a lot of like breasts hanging out, which is very clearly, it has political interpretations in what was the East German film, the Star Trek-y one that we watched? The name is escaping.
There's Signals. It's the one that's not Signals.
Yeah, that one has that sequence with like the boss, right? Who is, with all these women who are like doing yoga or something and naked.
In the Dust of the Stars.
In the Dust of the Stars, thank you. Yeah. That one I feel like has like a political meaning behind it because of the power, the masculine sort of patriarchal power that is clearly rooted into that culture there. And so women don't really have what we would consider to be rights. And so that portrayal is there. In this case, the nudity is presented once as a sexual activity, or at least when she starts nude, it's not sexual, but then it eventually becomes sexual. I've never seen someone play piano nude before, but you know what? Some people, that's just how they need to play.
Yes, you have.
When have I seen a nude person playing on a piano?
Like every episode of Monty Python's Flying Circus.
Okay, fair point. I stand corrected. But anyway, I guess I'm rambling my way to the point that I think this film handles its nudity in a way that doesn't feel exploitative, and or at least not entirely exploitative, maybe a little bit for Jenny, but it feels like the scenes where it occurs have purpose and meaning, which can't be said of all films that just kind of like want to have a naked body that doesn't need to be there. I don't like that. I'm not a fan.
All right. Do you have any final thoughts on
Configuration Queen?
Or anything that we missed?
Well, in chat, Configuration Queen says she has seen a man in a skunk fursuit playing a piano. He was pretty good. I recognize music from Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
All right. Yeah. Uh-huh.
You know what? Never
Oh,
seen a guy in a skunk fursuit play, but
so you watched this more recently than I.
yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
music in it. Do you have any comments
Ah,
on the music? Because I seem to recall the music being very interesting, but I can't remember why. Because it's been a while since I
so
watched it.
it has some Moog synthesizer stuff, which is interesting, and a saxophonist, who the name of which I can't remember, but he's in the credits, and he's a very good saxophonist. I would say I wouldn't say that the soundtrack for me is it's the kind of soundtrack which I don't remember, but in the right way. Because sometimes there are soundtracks where like you don't remember it because there's absolutely nothing in it. It's a nothing burger. And then there's sometimes where you remember it, but you remember the soundtrack because it's horrendous. In this case, I feel like at times the soundtrack very much fits the film that we're watching. But I would say that the way that soundtrack is constructed, it feels almost like a jazz soundtrack in a sense, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's what I'm recalling. And that it really fits the sort of psychedelic vibes of the overall picture throughout it, but sometimes it almost clashes. Like from the very beginning, you have all these overhead kind of shots of those cloaked figures you're talking with the funeral procession, right? And yet you have this sort of like jazzy kind of
It's like an
funky music
upbeat.
going on in the background. Yeah, kind of upbeat. It's in some cases it fits perfectly to what you're seeing. Other cases it's kind of discordant, but never to the point of being like intrusive or like getting in the way of things, right? And so I guess in some ways that kind of goes along with the visual aspects of what you mentioned before, where you have some scenes that are just wildly contrasting in the sort of visuals that they're providing. You get that with the music as well.
Yeah, and this is mentioned like all over, like it's on the wiki, it's in some of the interviews, etc. And Mike Moorcock talks extensively in the interview on the disc that he had originally wanted Hawkwind, which is a like progressive rock band question mark that he had some involvement with, and he wanted them to do the soundtrack. They ultimately went a different direction, but I don't know that there are other films from this era that have had, you know, psychedelic rock bands, like progressive rock bands, do soundtracks. And I think the only downside to that approach is something they could not have possibly known at the time, which is that you know immediately what era you're in when you hear that.
Yeah.
In a
Right.
way that you don't necessarily get for like orchestral scores that come earlier. Like there's a style to those that kind of gives it away, but there's a lot of similarities in the structures of those soundtracks that we see today. It's just without the like really like obscenely large orchestras and choirs, etc., that get lobbed into there. And so it might have been interesting to see Hawkwind do the soundtrack. I almost kind of wish if they were still around, Severin had found a way to beg them to do
The alternate soundtrack.
but at the same time, I wonder if it would have clashed because it would have given this film a feeling that over time becomes less enjoyable. Some people really like that stuff. I think it's kind of hit or miss when you go for that very firm.
It immediately tells you a very certain age or era, which otherwise this movie is kind of like you're confused over what's going on, when it is, where it is, right? So
Yes.
there's
Yeah,
it
it's
would
in the
it would
future,
remove
question
that
mark?
ambiguity. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're right. It would kind of remove that ambiguity, which, again, like they couldn't have known that at the time. Like, who's going to know in 1973 if we make this choice in 50 years, people are going to go, that's a 1970s soundtrack, right?
Yeah.
There's just no way to know it. So at the same time, you can't really blame them if they had gone with that choice. They didn't, but, you know, I try not to hold it against films that are older for not having soundtracks the way that we expect soundtracks to sound today. Although you can do this now if
Well,
you
really
want
any aspect.
yeah. Like if you watch films from like the late 90s, early 2000s that have, you know, not orchestral scores, but they like have, you know, punk rock songs or whatever, right? Some of them, like, they kind of age like fine wine a little bit. And then some of them you're just like, oh, Jesus, they chose that song? Like, where it's like, that song's so cringe now. You know, like what? And I don't know. I
Or
think
you
like
can
American
just tell
Pie,
an 80s movie or the 90s movie that has the rap song in the middle of it.
Oh, my good Lord.
Or the center. Yeah.
It's even worse when they add a rap song from someone you've never heard of before, and they get to be themselves in the movie, like in Birdemic.
Yes.
Hanging with my family.
I guess that I'll see at some point.
Oh, no, we're skipping it.
We're skipping that from the Redux.
Sorry,
it is
I
banned.
hate Birdemic. It is so bad. But maybe I'll laugh about it this time because it is so bad that it might almost be good, but probably not. But anyway, I think we can start to wrap up.
Yeah, I think we need to.
Yeah. So, folks, if you have seen this film or read the book and would like to send us a comment, you can do so skiffingfanty@gmail.com if you're not a member of our Patreon. But if you are, you can go to Discord and you can go talk in the show discussion or movie discussion channel or book discussion channel if you like. So please do. And if you'd like to find us on socials, we're on Blue Sky, Threads, Mastodon, YouTube, and a whole bunch of other places. All of that is at skiffyandfanty.com/skiffythings. Obviously, skiffyandfanty.com is our webpage, so that is where you can find our show and all of that good stuff. We are live every Friday, almost, at 7 p.m. Central on Twitch at twitch.tv/alphabetstream. So please join us for our live shows if you'd like to be in chat with us, because I'd be lovely to have you here. And then if you have money that you do not need for, food, medication, feeding your kids, all of that kind of stuff, and you'd like to support the show, which we could really use, please go to patreon.com/skiffyandfanty. $1 is the lowest amount that you can give. But any amount is lovely, and it helps us pay for hosting and other kinds of stuff. We just shoot to break even on this show. We're not trying to make a profit, and I will just be honest, we're not quite at break even right now. We're a little short. So if you would like to do that, that would make us feel considerably better. So with that in mind, we have a whole lot of Patreon supporters to thank, and those include Adam the Adventurous, Andrea the Abide-alluring, Allured-abiding, Cameron the Chthonic, Carolyn the Benevolent, Carrie the Divine, Chris the Candescent, Dan the Transient, Daniel the Cultured, David the Debonair, Elizabeth the Electrifying, Erica the Esteemed, Jeff the Gracious, Joe the Jocund, Joseph the Jovial, Juan the Junctional,
KB the Kind, Karen the Kick-Ass, Kat the Kinematic, Matthew the Magnificent, Paul the Pious, Robert the Reliable, Robin the Bold, Ryan the Resilient, Sarah A, the Sensational, Sarah E, the Sublime, Sarah O, the Rapturous, Stephen the Strange, Tari the Thorough, Tanya the Triumphant, and Trish the Imperturbable. You
can find me at seanduke.net. That's Sean with a U, by the way. I never do that, but there you go. And if you put /Duke things, you will find all of my social links and my Twitch and all of that good stuff. You can obviously find me every Wednesday and Sunday at 6 p.m. Central right here on Twitch at twitch.tv/alphabetstreams for games and other shenanigans. And so please go check those things out.
You can find me, Daniel, on the Skiffy and Fanty blog. So if you don't read that, please do. Trish and Paul are other big contributors to that blog. So we have lots of good features on it. You can also find me reading 1000 Lives on Blue Sky. That's the number 1000.
Yay! All right, Skiffy and Fanty bylaws require me to make this hopeful. And my hopeful statement will be that you may be surprised at how easy it is to grow things in a container on your porch that you can then eat. And so I would recommend, if you have the ability to, any spot that may get a little bit of sun or whatever, and you can go stick a cute little pot or even grow some indoor plants that might make your life better, do that. You can't probably eat the indoor plants, but they're still nice and they make you feel happy. And I just recommend, as the world gets more difficult and hard, we should try to spend more time with nature. And one of the ways we can do so is by learning how to care for it in our own unique little way. And so I say that because I've got so many cucumbers and tomatoes growing right now, and I am desperately trying to figure out how to keep them growing.
You see, the world is a tasty place.
It is. You're correct. Especially in my yard, because almost everything is edible in my yard. So, in fact, some things I didn't know were edible are edible. And I was like, oh, I should probably try that. And then the flowers that were edible fell off, and so they were no longer edible.
Aww.
But you know what? Such is life. I have tried some things that I never thought I would put in my mouth. And while not all of it was delicious, I'm glad I tried it. So anyway, that's my hopeful ending. So learn about nature. All right, hopeful ending and scene. If you want to support this show, you can go to patreon.com/skiffyandfanty or skiffyandfanty.com, our website, where you can get access to all of our fancy things. Our music comes from Holy Mole. You can support him and his work at patreon.com/holymole. Thank you for listening.